Oh, hello there. I'm Jimmy Shuker, alongside Albert Chalmers and Shawn Goodman, and this is Radiant Light, a spiritual discussion podcast, episode 17. On today's episode, both Albert and Shawn are reunited back in Canada, where they'll be catching up with one of Albert's oldest friends, Jamaal Richer. Jamaal is a fighter and he runs a gym called Forge Martial Arts. He runs programs in Muay Thai, boxing, wrestling, MMA, and a martial art which will be the predominant subject of today's episode. Today, we'll be discussing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or as we like to call it, BJJ. Today we will be discussing Jamaal's background, how he came to run the gym, and of course, the philosophy of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as whichever platform you listen to your podcasts on. And you can even follow us on Instagram too. Radiant_light_podcast. And you can always reach out to us at radiantlightpodcast1, that's the number 1, at gmail.com. Now with that being said, I'll hand you guys over to Albert and Shawn now, and I'll see you guys on the other side. Enjoy the episode.
Hello, Jamaal.
Hello, Mr. Albert.
Sensei, Conor, Shawn. We're in the Forge Martial Arts Academy here.
Yeah, here in Mississauga.
That's your gym. So, why don't you just tell us how you got into martial arts and then how you came to being a gym owner?
I think I started martial arts for the first time ever when I was 4 or 5. I was really young, right? And it was because of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I saw that and I was like, I want to do martial arts. My grandma was like, sure, we'll find you some martial arts. She's like, okay. So I ended up in these karate classes. I believe it was called Super Kids Karate, right? And I ended up getting kicked out because when you have your sparring in karate, it's point sparring, right? Where you touch.
Like Shotokan.
Yeah. And they never really explained the concept of sparring to me as a kid. And I grew up in a pretty rough neighborhood, so I've seen what a fight is. Yeah. So when they were sparring, I thought we were fighting. So I was beating kids' asses. Yeah. Because I was just a fight to me. I was grabbing their gis and pulling them down and stuff like that.
More of an MMA type style.
Yeah, it was just more aggressive than the other kids. So they were
Super Kids, yay!
They were you should probably stop breaking him. My grandma was whatever. So, and I don't think I really did anything again until I was around 10, 11 years old, and I started wrestling. So I did freestyle wrestling with a gentleman named Marlon Sherlin. And he was running these these evening classes. I started wrestling with him for a couple years. I enjoyed it, but then got into high school, and our school, Applewood, no wrestling team, so I just quit wrestling, and I didn't get back into martial arts until I was 15. And it's because I was looking for a place to do martial arts. Again, I think Ong Bak inspired us. So I saw Ong Bak, and then I was looking for a place. I taught Muay Thai Mississauga, and that's when I found out about combat arts. So me and Sohaib took our bikes, and we rode down to combat arts, and we took our trial classes. And the first class I did was Muay Thai. Second class I ended up doing was Jiu-Jitsu, and I've been doing both since, right? And because of that, I ended up getting my first job because I'm how am I going to pay for the year membership for this place? It's $1,000 for a year at the time, right? So I went and got a job at a golf course. So I'd work there during the summers, make enough money to pay for my year membership, and then that gym actually opened me up to martial arts so much, because at the time they had everything. So you could go and do Muay Thai, Savat, Jun Fan Gung Fu, which is a defensive portion of Jeet Kune Do, right? They had Kali, wrestling, boxing, right? So there's like all these things at your disposal, which is really dope. There's that era of combat arts, especially, like, I guess it's like very nostalgic to me, but like there's not been anything quite like that since. They still run and they still have a majority of those classes, but like literally there's always something going on. You could go there and you could like go and learn like 5-6 martial arts every single day. So it's dope, right? And when you're
like a peak era,
when you're a young kid and you have all the time in the world, like,
but don't you think
you learn
that
so much
kept you on like a good path as opposed to like maybe getting into some other dumb shit? Like you said, you grew up in a rough area, and we went to a school where a lot of dumb, not that you didn't get into some altercations or anything, but mostly that was in self-defense or whatever, right? So
yeah, I don't know, we grew up with, like, I think anywhere you grow up you're gonna have a lot of ignorant people, like, because like when I was very young, like I was like at here, Ontario and Dundas, right? And it's still not the best area, but like back then in the early 90s it was like pretty bad.
Yeah.
By the time I was like in high school, like it was in like normal, like middle class suburban area, and like all the kids that went to Applewood were generally middle class suburban kids, but for some reason, I don't know, it was rap music or just people not having enough problems in lives. They always wanted to cause fucking problems, and it was an odd time to grow up in that place. Like when I tell people stories about Applewood and like the things that we experienced growing up, no one believes it's real. And then like I'll have someone like you or like Justin, and you'll come and even they'll end up telling the same story, and they're like, yo, that actually happened? I'm like, yeah. I went to university, and when I was done with that, I was like, I don't want to be a nurse here in Canada. It's bullshit. And the medical system here sucks. I feel like a lot of the people here that work as nurses don't really care about people. And not all of them. Some of them are like genuinely good, caring people, but a lot of them like get empathy burnout. And a lot of them also do it just because they know it's a job where they're going to get they're going to get paid well, it's secure, and like they're going to have a lot of freedom, like, you know, to go and like travel and stuff like that. So they don't do it because they like to genuinely help people. They do it because, hey, it's a good job, right? And then if you don't genuinely want to be in that job because it is fucking hard, and you're like, oh, this is bullshit, you're eventually going to start treating the people like shit, right? And I like saw that all over the place. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I'm down. So
how long were you in nursing college for?
Like 3 years, right? And then one of my friends called me out of the blue, and is a guy I trained under and with for a long time. He was a guy named Frank Marquez, and he was a brown belt, very, very, very talented. And he called me out of the blue, and he's like, hey, I'm thinking of fighting again. I've been training at UFC gym, and there's a professor there, and he's got like jiu-jitsu like I've never seen before. And that meant a lot coming from Frank, because Frank's been like, you know, all around the world doing jiu-jitsu. He's trained with like BJ Penn, like BJ Penn knows him personally. He's like stayed in slept in BJ Penn's gym because he's training there. Yeah, he's like been to Brazil, like all over Brazil training. Like I know he trained with like Marcelo Garcia in New York, and I think like Pablo Popovich in Florida. So like when this guy's saying that someone has like really legit jiu-jitsu, it's like something you take seriously. So I'm like, okay, cool. And I've been a training partner for his, so I'm like, okay, I'll help him, you know, get ready for these fights. I'll start training again. And man, it was jiu-jitsu like I never seen before. Like he whipped my ass, right? And he still whips my ass. This is my current professor, Martin Peru. And he like whipped my ass. Like my ass has never been whipped before. And I was like, shit, man, I guess I'm going to learn from this guy. He's like, you know, one of the black belts that rolls with his students. Like he rolls with everyone, right? So I got to roll with him the first time, and like my ass was kicked like it's never been kicked before. And from there I was like, yeah, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to learn from this guy. And now that's like 6 years later. Right. And, you know, we went from UFC gym to another gym where we spent some time, and then like COVID happened, and me and him got together with my wrestling coach, and we made the decision that we were going to open up our own gym.
So during COVID, you were like training the whole time.
Yeah.
Was it out of this place, or you?
Yeah, so it was here out of the Forge the whole time. I trained through it. Yeah. Actually, no. At the beginning, we were still at our old place at that gym there, and like for the first, I think like month, no one would really train with me, right? Because like people like didn't know what it was. Like people were thinking that like everyone was gonna die for this, this, and I was just trying to live my life. So for the first like month, I was just like lifting weights. And I hate lifting weights, but I'm like, fuck it, there's nothing else to do, so I'm lifting these weights. So I was lifting these weights, and eventually people started training with me again, and I was like, all right. People kind of lost like the heebie-jeebies, and they're like, okay, maybe this isn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. So from there on in, I was like training like 2-3 times a day.
Cool. So when you opened a gym, did you have some kind of like goal in mind, or was it just, I want to do this for full time, I just want to make this my life, my whole lifestyle is suited around this place now, this like location?
I feel like my goal is just to make like a place where people could come and learn martial arts and just enjoy it, right? Like I always like look back to like when I started at Combat Arts. It's like I can come there and I could literally do like anything. I can go and learn anything, right? And there was no like, it wasn't that clicky at the time. Like I could go from this to this to this to this, and no one would be like, oh, you're like a jiu-jitsu guy, or oh, you're like a Thai guy.
You in that way?
Yeah, like you could kind of move through anything. Like there were periods in time where it eventually became like that, but when I first went there, it's like you could just like do anything, right? And like there was only like one membership. You paid the like all access membership, and you could go to any class, anytime. And that's the way it was. So that's kind of what I've done here. It's like we just have like a general membership. You pay it. You can go to any of the classes. You can box, kickbox, wrestle, do jiu-jitsu, anything, right? So I just want to make it as simple as possible and give people access so they could train as much as possible, because like I think if you're a real martial artist, you should be interested in like every aspect of martial art, right? Like
don't limit yourself, be like, I'm a striker, I'm a grappler.
Yeah,
like,
I think
a martial artist is a martial artist.
Yeah, I think that's the dumbest thing, because like especially when you look at like, you know, some of the true goals of martial arts. Like the first goal of martial arts, like you just want to be like the best possible version of yourself, right? And then after that, I guess it would be like, okay, well, there's many things, but then like one of the main goals is you want to be able to defend yourself and, you know, your loved ones. And if you only have like one thing you can do, is not going to cover all the bases, right? Like
you can't be like, sorry, I only do striking. We have to.
Yeah, it's like, okay, like I only want to stand up. But by the same token, like, what if you can't take someone down, right? And I even tell that to people who do jiu-jitsu all the time. I'm like, you should do some form of striking, even if it's not as often, because what if you can't take? What if you have to punch someone, right? And then like, you know, what if someone pulls out a knife and you see like a pipe laying on the street? So you should have some kind of weapons training too, right? You should be prepared for like, you know,
it's all connected,
the most violent situation possible. Like I think everyone should go learn how to shoot a gun as well, right? You should have like all the bases covered, because you never know what like life may bring your way. And if you're, you know, you feel that like existing is like, you know, important to you, you should be able to defend that. Right? Or like if you have kids or a wife, like how shitty would it be if like, you know, some guy like goes and like grabs your wife's ass, and you have to be like, oh fuck, man, like
I gotta do it.
yeah, it's like, what am I gonna do about it?
Confidence in the scenario, right? Not have any hesitation.
Yeah.
An unexpected thing.
Yeah, you don't want to panic in that moment. That's
you want to be able, right? But there's situations where something like that might happen, and it's like, oh, it's like 5 guys. It's like, okay, we got to go the other way, because that's an important thing too, is knowing when to walk away, right? That's the most important thing. It's like rather than fight, the first thing you want to do is walk away. If you gotta fight, you want to know how to handle yourself in all the scenarios that might present themselves.
That the hard way. Is that fair enough? Or did you always come out on top in these like moments, in these altercations?
Whenever I had like,
because I was the first to ninja the fuck out. I was like, but I see Jamaal, he's still there. What the fuck? He's still standing in that circle of guys. I'm like, fair play to him, man. You know.
I think like just because I did train, like most situations, I got out fine.
Yeah.
Like I never really got my ass kicked in real life, like out in the streets where it's like a serious problem, right? And I do credit that to training, because like most people don't know how to fight.
Well, even that, you're not letting the emotional element of it overwhelm you. You're just staying kind of zen in that moment where you're just like, oh, I know how to defend myself. I've been here before.
Yeah.
That's what I got from training, right? Is when you actually enter a situation in real life where you have to fight someone or like you're being pushed to do that.
Yeah.
If you've trained, you don't have any insecurities about questioning, can I handle this? Like, do I have to prove myself against this person?
Yeah.
You know what you can do and you understand like where you stand with that person. It's easier just to leave it be, right?
Yeah, so most times, like, exactly what Conor said is, like, when you get in a situation, you're like, I don't need to fucking fight. I know I can fight. It's
yeah,
like,
a lot of guys start fighting because they're insecure about themselves. They get called out, they get called a name. They're like,
Their
I'm
ego,
not
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they let the ego get into play, and they feel they have to prove something.
Especially, like, when people get the drinks in them, that's what I've noticed it's the worst. Like, I remember there's, like, one guy that used to hang out with me and my friends. Every time we'd go out and he would drink, he'd be like, I'm going to get in a fight tonight. I'm like, no, man, why? He's like, you got my back. I'm like, and it was not even a guy that I knew particularly well. He's like, you got my back, right? And I'm like, look me in the eyes, man. I will let you die. it's like, I didn't grow up with you. You're not one of my, like.
You told him, I'm a martial artist. He's like, cool, let's go pick a fight. You got my back.
He's like, you got my back. I'm like, no, man, I will let you die. I don't know you that well.
But you had you did have friends. It's like ride or die kind of friends. And
Oh, yeah.
You have like everybody else who it's like,
Yeah.
you're on your own. Like,
But that's what people are craving too, because we have war in our history, right? In
Yeah,
our DNA.
that's
a lot
true.
of people have that instinctual aggression.
Yeah.
So they want to get that out, and training in a gym,
it's the most healthy.
training on Mars, that's the best way to get it out, to express that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But then a lot of people are looking for it, and the only way they know is going to a bar and starting something. That's what they want to do.
Yeah, and I think like part of it is the only way they have the courage to do it because they're like, fuck, I don't know if I can fight. So then they drink and it's like, yeah, I think I can fight.
False confidence.
Yeah, it's a false confidence. Or like, yeah, they're like, oh, well, if I get my ass kicked now, I can say, oh, I was just drunk. That's why it happened. Like, it's just a built-in like excuse, I feel, right? And that's why like some people get very bold when they drink. And I'm like, oh, please don't do this to me. I've seen it too many times, man. Yeah.
But wouldn't you say that's the difference between a martial artist and just I fight in the street sometimes when I'm drunk, or like those people? You know, it's a different kind of person. But maybe there's
It is a different type of person, but even amongst people who do martial arts, there's martial artists and there's like athletes, right? And like sometimes it's like, there's like, man, not everyone that trains martial arts is a good person. Like there's like, it's like there's the Sith and the Jedi like in martial arts, just like there is in Star Wars, man. Like there's some like very like well trained people out there where I'm like, fuck, man.
But you know more? Like I've heard, I think it was Conor and Gracie who said that, like, people can act really cool and stuff, but then when I roll with them, I feel their vibe. Like, I know who's not a good, like you said, a Sith or whatever. He can tell. Do you see that, like, more when you're rolling, or do you see it more just from talking to people, or?
No, I don't know, man, because like you could think someone's a fucked up person and they're a really good person, and sometimes you could think they're a good person and they're a fucked up person. Like, you know, sometimes you can get a sense of a person, but you never really know what's in someone's head. With a lot of people, it's like, yeah, I hope that guy's a good person. And then they can go do something really messed up. So it's like, I feel like, you know, rolling with someone, you can't know everything about them. Like they could, you know, they could be doing all kinds of crazy shit.
It does let you tap into kind of like their nature, though. They're like more animal nature of the person. Right. Like I know sparring with people. I remember sparring Jawad way back in the day at Burlington. And once it got into a zone where like I caught him with something, whatever, and then he started to get serious, his face changed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I saw like an animal.
It's like a
literal animal instead of a
shit.
human type thing.
Wow.
Because that like instinctual, like carnal aspect of the person, like the real warrior,
The
that
primal.
the primal. It came out, right? So you tap into kind of primal nature of
Yeah. When push comes to shove, Jawad always threw down, man.
I was going to ask, do you mostly just train jiu-jitsu now, or are you still active in all the main forms of MMA? Like,
I still do everything, right? Like, I coach jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai for kids, right? But when it's the adult class, my professor is always here teaching the adult class, right?
So you're a student at the
I'm a student at the same time. With boxing, I have the same luxury where again, I teach the kids the striking, but my boxing coach also teaches out of this gym, right? Tyrone Bradshaw, yeah. And then my Muay Thai coach lives in Ottawa now, so I run the adult classes here for Muay Thai, but that's the only one where I still don't have my teacher like right there every day to train under.
But you're still practicing. You're teaching.
I still practice,
and learning and teaching go hand in hand.
Yeah, it does. But it's always like, it's always nice when you have like, you know, that resource to go do, like to always constantly grow. Because for me, it's like, even though like I still coach, I still see myself as a student first, right? I'm not a person who's like, well, I know it all. I'm like, no, I want to figure out more of this stuff, man.
You think that's like a problem with people? Like, you're a brown belt now. Do you think there's certain people that they just think they have nothing left to learn, or is it just you're always finding new, endless possibilities because it's so deep? Like you can never reach the pinnacle of it.
I think that comes down to each individual person, because there's people like that after a year think they know it all, right? And that might be like the environment they're in too. If there's not people pushing them, they can think like, "Fuck, man, I've reached the top of the mountain," right?
It's just this mountain, there's another.
And it's like they're just in a very small like ecosystem. Like they could go like across the street and be like, "Oh shit, no."
Don't you think that was the problem before UFC and MMA blew up? That it was like these small dojos, like Ohio Karate Academy, and it's like a small dojo, and they're just in this echo chamber where my sensei is like God. He can touch of death me or whatever. But then when MMA happened, maybe you could actually explain that. So like BJJ. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It started in Brazil, and then it became the UFC. But there's like a long history there that maybe you could give a brief overview.
Well, first of all, I'm going to say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu started in Japan, because it's really it's just Jiu-Jitsu, right? Like Mitsuda Maeda or Konde Koma, right? He came from Japan as like a cultural ambassador, and he taught, you know, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to a couple of rich people, and then the Brazilians made massive advancements at the time, right?
What
like
kind of advancements?
Just a lot of positionings, right? Like
guard play and stuff, more so.
Yeah, they expanded on the guard play because, again, well, Jiu-Jitsu became Judo and became Jiu-Jitsu again, right? Like,
so Jiu-Jitsu is like the samurai art form. When you lost your sword, you're in a grappling altercation. That's Jiu-Jitsu, but then it became sport Judo after.
The way I understand it is, at a time there was Japanese, like after the samurai era had ended and like they were teaching like martial arts in schools around Japan, is Jiu-Jitsu was practiced, but they didn't really allow sparring. Right? So Kano Jigoro kind of broke off and started doing Judo. His own thing, right? Which originally I think they just called it like Kano Jiu-Jitsu, right? And then eventually they ended up calling it Judo. And his focus was more so on sparring every day, right? So a bunch of jiu-jitsu people who are already black belts in jiu-jitsu went with him, and they're like, yeah, like I want to see what we can figure out doing it live, right? Because the problem was like when you don't have pressure testing, or like you're not sparring very often, you can lose a sense of what reality is and what's real and how you'll react under pressure, right? Like imagine back in the days, and it was very interesting because recently there was like an authentic Indian martial arts seminar here at my gym. They had 2 seminars, and
Is it Shastra Vidya?
Shastra Vidya, yeah. And my friend Brad Varsalva kind of set it up with his they refer to like the senseis like Gurdev, right? And his Gurdev was like explaining how like their martial art is very much for like the battlefield, right? And it's really cool because it's one of those martial arts where I feel like people will look at it and be like, I don't know if it's real, right? And I tell you, as a person that's like done martial arts for almost 20 years of my life, like the shit he was doing was like real. And it's like the way they even move, it's like completely different, right? And what he was explaining with the way they practice their martial art is like they teach you like how to move, right? And like some concepts. But he's like, in Shastra Vidya, they don't really have drills, right? Because they do a lot of sparring. Like you have to like figure it out and see the way you move as an individual, right? And
there's no like kata forms or whatever. It's just sparring.
So imagine like back in the days where it's like literally people went out and fought with their sword and their shield, like in Japan, in India, anywhere around the world. It's like a bulk of your day is, as a warrior, is probably training. You're training every day, probably a couple hours, right? And that's like a big part of your life. So you are doing a lot of sparring, right?
Your life
when those like eras kind of ended and like we became more civilized, even though when people were practicing martial arts, it's like they got really disconnected, right? Instead of like people practicing like, 6 hours a day of martial arts, even at that time, like maybe it was like 3 hours, but like they went away from like sparring and stuff like that. So it took away like the pressure testing. So when Jigoro Kano came, he kind of like put that back in, right? Where it's like, okay, we're going to spar every day. And they were able to do it more safely because with grappling, right? Like
tapping,
right?
Submissions. And
yeah, but like grappling's like a little bit different from striking, right? Like I feel like if you're gonna like, one thing I think the Thais do brilliantly is tech sparring, right? Because here in North America, they do like a whole bunch of fucking hard sparring.
It's like that Dutch style, just like
they're just banging. Everyone goes home with headaches every day, and people's careers and lives are short, right? And then you see these Thais with like 300 fights, and it's like, dude, how's he doing that? Like when I see that, I'm like, that can't be possible, but it is. They're doing it. It's because like it's like they spar in a way where it's like light and playful, but they also like make each other face like realistic scenarios, right? Yeah. And I think that's something we can really learn from, right? Fortunately, in grappling, you can go much harder, and you can still perform tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day, and that's what Conor Jigoro did, and that's why judo was so successful, right? And because they were now going into the police force and throwing all of them, they're like, yo, like, how are these guys beating the shit out of us? Well, it's because they spar every day. It's like their method wasn't that different, right? Like, you can almost look at it, if you look at like the purest form of judo and the purest form of jiu-jitsu, they're almost the same martial art. One looks at it from the top down, one looks at it from the bottom up, right? Where
perspective is a little different, but
right? Like where judo, they focus more on the takedown and less on the nawaza, like what happens on the ground. And in jiu-jitsu, they focus more on what happens on the ground and less so on the takedown. Yeah. So like they're literally the same idea, just flipped, right? So that's why I say jiu-jitsu became judo and became jiu-jitsu again, because then when Mitsuda Maeda went around the world, right, because he was a black belt in jiu-jitsu, then became a black belt in judo when he broke off with that whole group. And then he got sent around the world as a cultural ambassador. Like, I know he went to Cuba, got kicked out, went to France, kicked out. And he was learning martial arts, like, all around that, right? Like, this wasn't a man that only grappled. Like, he went and did a bunch of, like, ballet tudo, like, fights where it's, like, just fist fights, no gloves, headbutts, grappling, punching, right? It's a man that could fight.
So Brazil had, like, a tradition of no holds barred fighting going on.
Yeah, so fighting was very much so part of their culture. So when he went there and he didn't get kicked out, he was like, oh, this is where I belong, right?
It also looks like paradise.
Yeah. So I think he had like 5 or 6 black belts, and from there, that's what, branched out and became Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Is the story that Helio Gracie is like a smaller dude, and he couldn't, he was like, had illness problems, so he had to like develop his own techniques just so he could match the brute strength of the other guys, and he fought like the Kimura guy, and he wouldn't tap. He's just like a really hardcore.
So,
and then he had all those sons who just.
It depends who you ask, because Helio was never a student of Mitsuda Maeda, right?
He watched his brother.
Carlos Gracie was the Gracie was a student under Mitsuda Maeda, right? And what people don't realize, there are also non-Gracie lineages of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There's not many, but there's GF Team, and there's another half of Nova Nyao is a non-Gracie lineage.
Oh, really?
Right? It's just that the Gracie family was so big and so wealthy that they were able to like spread it out, right?
And marketed it to the world. Right?
Yes. Right? So then Carlos ended up teaching Helio and his brothers. I think it was Helio, Carson Gracie, Rolls Gracie. There were so many of them, right? And then their sons learned, right? And Helio's got, his part of the lineage where they focus more on self-defense now, right? And yeah, Helio was a smaller guy and was able to overcome a lot of bigger people with his techniques, but Kimura kicked his ass.
Yeah.
He had like 50 pounds on him or something.
Right? And it's not a surprise, right? But again, it depends who you hear the story from, right? Some people will romanticize and say it was a long match, it was a close match. And like from other sources, you hear, man, no, that was like 2 minutes. And
But at least what did happen, we know what happened. It's like the illusory walls of styles and everything started to decay through the years until UFC kind of like smashed the mirror, and it was like, no, there's no such thing as like a perfect style. Of course, BJJ early on was the one that.
So yes, but like it's the funny thing is like MMA wasn't a new concept, right? Like they had that since like the 20s or 30s in Brazil, and it was called Vale Tudo, and everyone would just get together from different styles and
on the beach and scrap.
Yeah, they did it in stadiums too, and they would just figure out like who's the man today, right? And like it's funny because like even when you look at the progression of jiu-jitsu, right? Mitsudo Maeda was going around the world having fist fights, like, freestyle fight matches and stuff like that. So he was using his grappling, but he was like doing ground and pound and stuff like that. I think it's like when the Gracies, not all the Gracies, when certain branches of the Gracie family got their hands on jiu-jitsu, they kind of marketed it as more, it's going to be a gentleman's thing. We're doing this for self-defense. You can overcome with just grappling. Right, like in reality,
upper class as well, right? In Valley, anyone can just come here. And
right, train. And like a lot of those guys ended up fighting Vale Tudo to prove their point, right? But like, it's like at some point, I feel it had all this striking element to it, like where it was like very real, where it's like, hey, you're in mount, just punch the guy. It makes sense, like it's right there.
Yeah,
boom, right? But then as people wanted to practice it more safely and make it a sport, is like like. How many people are you going to sell Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to if they come in, look in the room, and they see you slapping the shit out of each other in mount? You know what I mean?
Which they did. It's like those Gracie videos. What were they called?
The Gracie Challenge, right?
Yeah.
But that was at a different point where they were trying to prove the art. But I mean, like right now, in 2023, if people come into our gym to see Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and every day we get on the mats, and I take someone down with a double leg, dump them on their head, mount them, and I just start beating them.
Bring my kid in, and I'm like, "You want to try?"
No. How many people are you going to retain, right? Because there's some schools with like hundreds of students. You'll have 5 at the biggest school, 5-10 people, because like most people that scares them, right? It's like. Especially now, I don't know if it should. Like, I feel like as a human, it's like that's part of you, right? But now in modern day, we're taught to be so disconnected from that. Like, like violence is bad. Violence is never the answer. It's not true.
Toxic masculinity or something.
Yeah, things like that. Like, violence is the answer sometimes. If you look at history, every major conflict has been solved with violence. There's been very little in history that's been solved with a handshake and a contract.
Yeah.
Well, you look at nature too. Nature is violent.
Yeah, right. And we always forget that we're part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, a wave.
Yeah.
A wave doesn't care what style
you are. It's powerful. It's violent.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
True.
It's nature. It'll always be nature.
Yeah. So I think a lot of that's been forgotten, but yeah, that's kind of like a very brief history of like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
At least the one thing that transpired was now like martial arts are mainstream again in a big way, and it's more popular than ever, and maybe that's a healthy way of dealing with all this inner violent nature that you're talking about. Like, how are we going to deal with this in a positive way in the 21st century where we're not going to wars all the time? We can actually train together as friends in the gym. Technique.
I get that. I think it's just important for people to change in general, but there are wars all the time. And I don't think that's ever really going to change, right? It's like maybe the scale of the wars is different, right? Because now we're not fighting village to village.
I actually kind of think that was healthier. Like, if I could see your eyes while I'm killing you, that's a more connected thing than I got a drone. I'm just going to tap a few buttons and drop a bomb on your village.
It shows the reality in your face a little more.
Yeah. That's more like this is live sparring as opposed to like I'm just going to program.
Yeah, it might be a better way of settling things, but you know, technology solves a lot of people's problems, right? Like we as humans are meant to use tools because, you know, there's no way I'm going to go hand to hand with a silverback gorilla, so got to make a gun, right?
It's like right? Space Odyssey. The bone,
it's like, right? You know,
the bone and it becomes a spaceship. It's kind of like it's just an extension of ourselves.
It's like,
right?
Have you ever heard the saying like God made all man, but Samuel Colt made all men equal, right? Because like, look, man, you trained for 20 years, you can kick the shit out of me, but this, I got this friend. Like it's like now we're the same. Right?
Do you think it elevates the mind of that person to be like, I'm a god now, I'm above mortality because I'm the one holding this weapon?
Well, no, the other person could probably shoot you too. Right? Probably makes you feel good when you're the person with the gun and they're not, though. Right? But that could be said of anything. If I have a bat and someone wants to fight me and they don't got a bat, I'm feeling pretty good in that situation.
But it doesn't necessarily make you like the morally superior person just because you happen to be, or like the more advanced person. You know what I mean? Like, the guns, germs, and steel theory, where it's like, well, white people had guns, so we conquered the world, but like we only acquired those guns as a sort of like a lot of luck was involved kind of thing. Like,
yeah,
it's not like we're actually better or genetically superior in any way. It's just like,
I think it's just like whoever figured it out first was going to take advantage of the situation,
exactly.
Right? Like. You know, it's like if you're the first person to find gold in the lake, you're going to go to that lake and you're going to try and like you're going to try and get as much gold out as you can before other people figure it out, right? Where I think Chinese discovered gunpowder.
There was Chinese alchemists looking for elixirs, and it was I believe it was during the Song Dynasty, and then they first used them for like fireworks and firecrackers.
And probably.
Yeah, that was the first.
Some white guy came down the Silk Road, and you're like, I think I could use that to shoot projectiles at people.
Can I buy some of your fancy fireworks to take home and kill some people?
It's like I want to see how this works, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, quite a few Asian empires though too, like the Mughals and.
Started with cannons and then moved to handheld. Probably, basically.
Back when they used like crossbows.
The Chinese had the fire lances. So it was essentially kind of like an explosive on the end of like they started putting like kind of projectiles. So it's kind of kind of like an early like shot, like a firework that like on the end of a stick that explodes
it's like a Roman
shrapnel in your face.
With an exploding projectile.
I never even knew that existed, man.
We got to bring that back.
Beer.
That sounds pretty cool. But I guess the problem is it made like the martial arts a little bit obsolete.
Yeah, I guess like in terms of like massive warfare, but like every invention you're gonna like, you know, a sword made fist fighting obsolete, and then a pike made a sword like obsolete.
I guess that's kind of like disconnecting people from their own self. Like that's the problem with technology these days. Is the disconnection from reality, and people not understand themselves because they give so much to this, whatever tool it is. And so that's the value of training a hand-to-hand martial art, right? Because you're learning your own hands and what they can do, rather than just a gun. It's like done, life taken, took almost nothing. You just had to pull a trigger. So that's the value of coming back to this, the hand-to-hand combat, right?
Well, the intimacy of it, right? Like you're sweating on the guy, and it's like you're connected to that person in that role or in that sparring.
Feeling the person's energy.
Yeah, it's like an energy thing. You're not intellectually...
Which is valuable these days with people being disconnected and isolated.
Fuck yeah.
Like, especially after COVID and all the isolation with that and the boom of technology.
Well, just having like these intellectual debates, it kind of doesn't get anywhere, where it's like, if you just shut up and train for an hour, you're going to feel way more relaxed in yourself.
From the exercise, from the interaction, from the understanding of your limitations and your capabilities. That direct human interaction. Totally valuable.
You would like overcome a lot of those. I don't like you. Like you said that thing about me 20 years ago. The first time you choked me was like grade 4. If I held
grade 2, man.
Or grade 2. So the story goes. I don't know. I said shut up or whatever, and he just like choked me. And then I was like, but my mom was like, you know, that's not okay and stuff. I'm like, but he's like my best friend in school. You know? I think in a way, we connected more after that. I don't know how to explain that.
Like, I think as kids, you always, like, fight your friends in some capacity, and then you're just like, all right, this guy's cool. Like, we figured it out.
You know that the intention isn't like, I'm going to fucking kill you. It's more like, we're buddies, and then there's like something comes up, you settle it in the moment, and then it's done. You squash the beef instantly, and you move on. You're better for it.
Yeah.
It's a good way of handling it.
And I think that's part of the reason why, like, there's so much, like, negativity in schools. They don't let the kids fight anymore. Like, I think that it's like, it's like, well, like, it's just like nonstop because like people don't disconnect from the internet, but like, you know, kids don't really fight in school anymore because there's like zero tolerance policies. It's like sometimes like maybe just let them fight it out and a fist fight won't turn into a stabbing. You know what I mean? It's like I could be wrong, but I feel like, you know, it's like
play fighting's a natural thing too with animals. Like every baby animal is going to play fight with the other kids, right?
Yeah,
cats, dogs, whatever.
You need to
squirrels
do that. Now they just want to restrict kids from doing anything.
Yeah, it's a very weird future.
I think it's wise to follow nature, right?
Yeah,
always. That's like the Tao way or the Zen way. It's kind of like
we're a part of the whole.
Yeah, like training like an animal. Like Hixson used to do that kind of animal
the movements
or whatever it was called.
Yeah, the movements, the different movements of the animal. Yeah, it's funny. Like in Shasta Vidya, there's a lot of components of that, like to that art. Like there's like he had like the bull, which was like almost like the grappling, where he'd be like sink his weight and like be very like heavy, and it's like very hard to like move him and like be out hand fighting me. And then like I think when he was like had his sword, it's like he called it like the leopard because it was like moving so like fast and like expanding. It was very like interesting. He had all these different like gears that he would shift, right? And he would relate it, and he was related to like different like animal like movements or like, you know, like strengths and weaknesses and stuff like that.
Yeah, I listened to Brad. He did a podcast with one of the guys out of, maybe it's Combat Arts or something. He's like a Jeet Kune Do instructor. I saw it on his Instagram. And I listened to it, and he said the only thing that reminds him of Shastra Vidya is Shaolin and how they both have the animal styles and kind of like... But Shastra Vidya comes from like a Sikh background, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But it's connected very deeply to the religion aspect. Like it all goes hand in hand. And Is Gatka the sport version of Shastra Vidya? Is that how that works? Or it's more modern? It's more modern, right?
It's more modern, like... The way he explained it is like Gatka, I think he said the roots almost come from like the Ottoman Empire or something like that. Like the roots of Gatka come from like the Ottoman Empire or like the Turks or something like that. If I am correct, I could be wrong, but I think that's what he said. Whereas I think Shasta Vidya, the roots is like solely from like India.
It's probably older as well.
Yeah.
That's cool. So how often do you have these kind of like... It's cool that you have an open door to people like that where you're like, bring your entire gang in. Yeah. There's like, how many people were here?
There like, probably like at least 50 people here.
And like mostly Sikhs living in Canada.
Yeah,
so that's really cool. I think keep doing that. Like for the community, that's key.
Yeah, it's really awesome too because it's like, there's not too many people left teaching that martial art, right?
Yeah.
And
last of the Mohicans.
Yeah. So Brad's Gurdev is just trying to keep it alive now, so he's really like spreading it and trying to teach a lot of seminars, a lot of people to, you know, kind of have people understand the concepts so that they can keep it going. And man, as I said, like there's definitely something to it. It was a very, very interesting martial art.
When he showed up, that one beat the crap out of cancer.
So he was using Gatka at that time, but even that was like, it's like his movement was crazy, yeah.
He showed me that one thing. It's like the kum or whatever it's called. But
that's from Shasta Vidya, the fire belly.
That thing is so cool. I don't know how to explain it. I should probably talk to him. Maybe I get him to explain it.
Yeah.
It's like kind of like a chi thing.
The way they like move and everything in Shasta Vidya is very much to do with like just moving with mass and gravity, right? So it's like instead of like fighting everything with your muscles, it's like you relax and you like flow, you spill over into your movements. And that's why like everything they do is like so swift and like heavy at the same time.
But does he translate that? Because he still trains judo and everything. So how you rolled with him, I assume.
Yeah.
Can you feel the difference in that sense? Like he has a better understanding of his internals? Or?
I think he's been able to start incorporating it into his like his other martial arts, right? Like especially like I see a lot of like how like because like from what little I've experienced, I've really seen how it could benefit stand-up grappling, right? Especially with like the one that he called the bull, like
But he's like an ambassador for that style, which is like it's not openly taught, but the Sikh community in this area is so massive that it's cool that it's like coming back again.
Yeah,
it's like a renaissance or whatever.
Right, it's like trying to remember what's been forgotten.
So would you say that your gym is like catered towards those kind of martial artists that are curious for new or old? I guess not new, but
I guess it can be, right? Because like if like someone wants to run a seminar and I am like, and it's like a person that I really like appreciate their opinion for martial arts, because there's a lot of stuff out there that is absolute garbage, right?
The McDojos.
Yeah, there's like lots of that stuff. Like if someone was gonna come here and be like, "Oh, we're gonna have like a Systema seminar," I'm gonna be like,
ninjutsu.
"No,
I can't teach a ninjutsu seminar."
No.
But it's.
What about an Aikido seminar?
Ooh.
No,
How's your feeling?
I've rolled with a guy who is like supposedly like a black belt in Aikido, and I was like, no. I'm like, I feel like this would never work on a person who's not drunk.
Right.
See, the one thing I took from Aikido, just like the philosophy of it, using a person's energy as they come at you and being able to redirect that so they use that energy use it against them, their own energy.
The mentality of it.
I try to apply that in sparring here and there if I can.
Yeah, but that's a concept, and that's already in Muay Thai. Like whenever you do sweeps, you're redirecting someone's energy. Like they push, you turn, you pull, boom, right? Like I think that's just a concept in all martial arts. It's like maybe that made you like the way they speak or their philosophy makes you more mindful of that concept, but that's already part of what you do.
Yeah, it's nice to see them like emphasizing that and saying this is a valuable.
But I guess by articulating it, then like you said, if you're mindful of it, it kind of opens you notice what you've been doing to re-emphasize it.
And that's a Jeet Kune Do thing, right? It's just Bruce saying whatever you see out there and absorb that works for you, take that in. But you don't need to attribute it to a specific martial art and like give all the credit just to that, right? These are all ideas that go between martial arts that flow through all of them, right? So,
and like I think if you can like listen, if someone can make Aikido work in real life, like kudos to them, because there's something I'm missing, and I could be missing it, right? But if you could take something and make it work on people, on like especially like high level, like people that are black belts in other martial arts, then there's something to it, right? It's like, can you make it work, right? Because not all things are going to work for all people, right?
That's a good, the way you said that too, because I think people have this idea that my thing is the one best thing that should work for all people, and like I've chosen this philosophy, I'm gonna like push it on people, and like if you don't agree with me, there's fault in your. But it's not that.
What about Krav Maga?
I think that if you're taught Krav Maga by someone from the Mossad, then there's probably something to it. But like, there's a lot of people who are like, I'm a level 1 Krav Maga instructor. And I'm like, that seems like you're just kicking people in the balls a lot. And I feel like as a like logical person, I figure that out on my own, that stomping a guy in the balls a lot is going to really hurt them. Right? It's like, oh, poke them in the eye, stomp them in the balls. Yeah, that's a great idea if I have to protect myself from like a rapist or someone who's a serious threat to me. But like, I don't like, that's not like a technique per se. Like if I take someone down and mount them, realistically, the best thing I could do is just take both my thumbs, put it in their eyes.
Some blade range.
Goodbye. You're not going to fight anymore, right? Like, it's like, why am I going to go through all the effort? Oh, I'm going to take his back and choke him out. Like, no, if this guy's really trying to hurt me and like, there's no like police or consequences are going to come out of it, it's like,
that would be it's something you can't really train for, right? You can't spar with
eye pokes, right?
Eye pokes and ball stomps.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. There are martial arts that really do focus on stuff like that. It's like, hey, maybe there is a little bit more to them, but like, it's like they couldn't do that reasonably in a sparring environment. Like, by no means do I think those arts like are great, but they might not completely be discounted because it's like, yeah, sometimes you have to poke someone in the eye, right? Because like it's got to be you or him, and you'd rather it be yourself, right?
Yeah, that's when you don't have a choice, and that's the last option, as opposed to the first option of just de-escalating the situation or leaving.
Yeah.
The situation.
No, I mean like you're cornered, or like this person's broken into your home, and maybe their dick's hanging out, and you got to make sure.
Someone's always running at you with a hard on, and you just know if I kick him in the thing, I stand a chance of
going back to what applies to certain people, like what works for different people. I know with Muay Thai, having trained that, I remember Suchart, Ajahn Suchart, he was explaining at this exhibition we had that Muay Thai essentially means the Thai man's way of fighting. Mm-hmm. That's what it means. And I feel like if you actually really want to learn it, you need to go to Thailand and train the way they train, live that life, you know, the Buddhist integration of it, all of it, right?
It's all interconnected.
But then I realized even for like my body type, most Thai people are like shorter, a bit skinnier compared to what I have. And so if I'm learning the Thai art, it doesn't necessarily all apply to me completely. I'd have to adapt different things to make different techniques work for my body.
Like
right?
the Dutch did, being so much taller.
Dutch kickboxing, right? So it is really important, even with something as reputable as Muay Thai, something as effective as it, you do have to work with your own limitations, your own body.
But you did do that. You did go to Thailand. So when you went to Thailand, what was the main difference as opposed to I'm training out of Mafa or Guelph MMA or whatever?
It's the routine, 6 days a week, twice a day, running before every session. It's the heat, it's the environment, the humidity. It's the fact that it's a cultural tradition and kids grow up training it. It's almost like it's much more like a family.
Yeah.
And so you understand that whole dynamic of it and the care they have and, like you're saying, the technical sparring and why they do it that way. It's almost like when they're so young, they can get out any kind of extreme craziness they have, with any aggression they have, and they understand that this is to help their community, it's to help their family, it's just more like a day-to-day life type of thing, so there's a lot more longevity taken into consideration in the training process.
Did you ever have the opportunity to learn Muay Baran when you were in Thailand?
I was only there for about 3 weeks, and I traveled around, went to like 4 or 5 gyms.
Yeah.
So I tried a few different gyms in the north and south. But Muay Baran, that's the specific. That's the
predecessor to Muay Thai. So like they say that Muay Thai is the more sportified version of
Baran is more warfare.
Yeah, right, and it's very interconnected with their Krabi Krabong.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is the weapons.
Yeah.
The Thai weapons.
Yeah,
especially in warfare. That's the great thing about Muay Thai too, is it does have pretty recent roots in real warfare, and it was put into a sport thing, but it still is connected to the original, real practical technique, right? Rather than just being pure sport.
Yeah.
It's kind of what we see with all these martial arts, right? There's the sport one and then the original.
Yeah, but something like karate, something older, it is older, and it had more of I think a dead period where it wasn't needed in real life as much, and it took a while for it to come back into the mainstream through the sport. Muay Thai, I feel like, though, the tradition of being a warfare-oriented, real-life thing, it's a bit more recent.
Yeah, and Ong Bak was like more Muay Baran and like all this. Tony Jaa's doing this acrobatic stuff, but I know he's obviously like done his research, right? Those techniques don't come from his imagination.
Well, I remember running into one guy. He just ran a rental shop in Koh Lanta in southern Thailand. He just rented mopeds, did boat cruises, just a chill guy, right?
Yeah.
Muslim guy. And I'd hang out with him for a few days in a row, and he'd just smoke these palm leaf cigarettes, rolled up in a palm leaf, just some tobacco they bought. And he said he trained Muay Thai. He learned from his father, and his father learned from his father. And he asked me, why do you train Muay Thai? Right? Pretty seriously. And so, I'm like, well, it's fine. Like, I can't discount that. Naturally, like, I just want to do it.
That's the best reason.
I love martial arts. Just reasons, right? And he's like, no. The reason you train it is out of respect for my father and my father's father and so on, right? Which emphasize more like it is heavily cultural. It's
tradition. Yeah, tradition.
It's tradition. And you can't just train it thinking like, I want to be the best fighter. Something like that. There's so much to it. It's integrated with religion, with the people, with the families.
Yeah, that's why they have the like Y crew apparently supposed to tell like a story.
Oh, the dance beforehand?
Yeah.
The respect for the teacher.
Yeah.
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 Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, apparently it's like if I'm correct, right? It's like the Y crew's supposed to tell like a story about like the people you train with, like your village and stuff like that, and like yeah.
The Y is this, and then the crew is the teacher. So the Y crew, the performance they do before the fight, all it means is showing respect for your teacher. And then each one can be different.
Yeah.
So it will tell a different story incorporated with growing up with that trainer and any story they might have.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
It's cool that they see their crew as like almost like a father in itself too, right?
That's what it is, because a lot of the kids leave their family completely and just go
they send them to the gym.
Because they're growing up poor farmers, right?
Yeah, and that's why like a lot of them, their last name, they adopt the gym's name, right?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Like Wolkow Porpramuk.
Yeah.
Yeah. His real name's Benchamek, I believe. That's his real name.
Yeah, and now he has gyms that now people take his name.
It goes back and forth, right?
Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah. I mean, today I'm going to try Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with the Ghee for the first time. I do want to go to Thailand this year and do the real thing. I'm just like trying to step it up gradually. Because like you said, why limit yourself and be like, I've reached my pinnacle, my peak, and everything, it's downhill from here. Like you hear those guys, I was on the college football team and that was the best of my years, and now I'm like drinking beer and fat and why'd you do that?
But you think about it's about self-improvement, right?
Yeah.
And life doesn't end.
And you're never perfect.
Life.
You're never perfect
You
either.
have kids that train. You're the future of humanity. We're all evolving and growing as time goes on, right? So,
So maybe we could do a cool video where you teach us some Ghee. Maybe just last thing, break down the difference between Ghee and no Ghee, because I have tried no Ghee. What do you think what am I going to feel in the difference between wearing a Ghee and rolling no Ghee?
So there's just like a lot more grips in Ghee, right? Like
lapel?
Yeah,
stuff?
like slower.
Is this a collar or is that, what am I saying wrong?
Yeah, the lapel. Yeah,
lapel.
Yeah, there's slower, there's more friction, there's more techniques because just like more shit to grab. And then no-gi is usually faster because less friction.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So would you say that training Ghee is almost essential to really learning the art and the style, like the true style of BJJ?
In my opinion, there are 3 branches to jiu-jitsu. There is Ghee, there is no-gi, and there's Vale Tudo.
Okay.
And in my opinion, in order to move forward in jiu-jitsu, you have to do all of them, right? So it's like there's people that just do Ghee. In my opinion, they're not doing all of jiu-jitsu. And there's people that just do no-gi. They're not doing all of jiu-jitsu. And both those people, they never practice at any point Vale Tudo, which is like, again, jiu-jitsu is striking.
No holds barred.
Right.
Kinda.
Like jiu-jitsu with the element of striking. Right. It's like, you know, what happens now if you're in guard and the guy's trying to punch you in the face? Like, how do you protect yourself? How do you sweep them? How do you take advantage of the situation?
So do you train that with MMA gloves, or how do you safely train?
Slap.
Just light slapping?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right?
Just light slapping.
Yeah.
Totally light. Like
So, to me, in my opinion, I think you need to do all 3 of those components. Of course, Ghee people would be like, Ghee is the only way to jiu-jitsu. And then no Ghee people would be like, I don't really care. I just want to smoke my weed and do rubber guard.
It's mostly no Ghee guys, like the 10th Planet and all that.
Yeah, no Gee's.
So the
10th Planet's like all like.
How do you feel about that anyway? Are you cool with like people smoking pot and doing jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, I don't care. Yeah.
But how come they avoid the Ghee though? Why is that? It's not as flowy or whatever?
It's like they might find the gi weird. They might think like, oh, it's like just like it's just like hot. It's more constricting. Like who knows, right? People just have preferences, right? But it's like I think to really say you're doing jiu-jitsu, you have to do all three, right? Because like if you're only doing one or the other, in my opinion, you're just kind of doing like a sport. Right? Because it's like, oh, I only do the gi because I want to be gi world champion, right? It's like, no, do everything. Because like, why should a person's clothing determine whether or not you can perform your martial art?
That's true. You're never going to be like, hold on, let me get my gi before you kick my ass.
Right? And at the same time, it's like, we live in Canada. Like half the year, people are wearing hoodies and coats. You can use that to choke a person unconscious. But then it's like, it's like it'll be summertime and the person will be like, oh no, what do I grab?
So if ADCC Abu Dhabi is the most prestigious Nogi submission grappling venue, what would be the gi equivalent?
Probably IBJJF Worlds.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've done a bit of competing, right?
Yeah. I've competed in a bunch of tournaments and super fights.
So you plan on doing more? That's not MMA though. It's just grappling.
Yeah. I've done MMA as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But you're gonna fight again in the future.
Yeah. I'll be competing in jiu-jitsu as always. I'll probably fight a couple more times too.
What's up, brother? Who's that guy?
Oh, he.
Spread the love, man.
He just lives upstairs. He's like my neighbor.
Yeah. I like that about Canada. People just walk up to you and get in your face and say crazy shit. And I miss that so much. But that's happening. That guy.
You're that. Okay, that appears to be all we have time for on today's episode. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as whichever platform you listen to your podcasts on. And you can even follow us on Instagram too. Radiant_light_podcast. And you can always reach out to us at radiantlightpodcast1, that's the number 1, at gmail.com. So until next time, good night, God bless, and Namaste.